Always got a good backbone.
Yep.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning. Nice to start soon. You don't have a shoulder to cry on there. Great.
All found.
It looks like we're just taking on to the last.
Good morning, Mayor.
I didn't understand all that stuff.
Yes, sir. I got that.
Based on our attendance, we may be out here sooner than later.
Dedication.
Well, that right over here, yeah, it's. So I guess my question is.
You're like from the plant with Oriental housing.
Not this three.
But either way. Not a quorum now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular workshop of the City of Griffin Board of Commissioners, September 27, 2022. First item is to present the final report of the compensation study, which includes marketing analysis of City of Griffin job positions and discuss proposed updates to current salaries. Project consultant Stacy Witchell with Evergreen Solutions will address. I'm sure Ms. Stephanie will start off.
Good morning. I'm not Stacy. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Stephanie Winter, HR Director. I have the pleasure this morning of introducing Stacy Wilchel, and she's with Evergreen Solutions. I'm going to take us back to January when your department directors met. We determined that one of our top goals for the year was a compensation study for our employees. We were delighted that we presented that to you all at your retreat in January. You also agreed and it became one of your top goals. So from there, we proceeded forward. We looked at several different companies. We actually vetted 3 companies in quite detail. It was not just myself. It was myself, John Hamilton, and a former director who's not with us anymore. And we met with all 3 companies to determine their approach, talk about what we were looking for, talk about some things we've learned in previous compensation studies, et cetera. Upon doing that, the 3 of us collectively agreed that Evergreen Solutions was who we wanted to use for this project. The reason for that is the approach, the methodology that they used. We felt that they really were listening to us and not telling us what we wanted to hear, but really listening to what we were trying to say. And we've been delighted. We have worked with Stacy. Pretty much she's been our consultant the entire time, so it's been nice to work with her the entire year. So we've got to know each other quite well. She's got to know the city quite well in our positions, how they're different, because sometimes they are different than other municipalities. And so she's really taken the time to meet, many times with Mrs. O'Connor and myself to talk about where we are in the study and talk about different methodologies in which we could use to implement and then what to do moving forward. So she's going to present that information to us today. And so Ms. Stacy, if you'll come on up. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, welcome.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I am Stacy Witchell with Evergreen, based out of Tallahassee, Florida. And as Stephanie said, we've been working on this project for a while now. Really enjoyed working with everybody. You've got a wonderful, wonderful staff here. Met with a lot of your department heads as well as we've gone through this study to really kind of understand where you guys currently are and what your needs are moving forward. So we'll jump in and I'll do a presentation, kind of give you an overview of what we've done and what those recommendations are. Is it loaded? I can click.
There we go.
There we go. This one. I've hit that point where I need 2 pair of glasses now. Okay. All right, so we'll walk through the presentation. And like I said, we'll just kind of touch on what the study goals were, what the phases of the project we went through, both internal and external, and then those recommendations and then our next steps. Now, the goal of the project was to review what you currently have in place, understand how you're using the compensation plan you have in place right now, what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, what your needs are as an organization, and understand where you have compression, where you have inequities internally, and then also where you compare externally. How do you compare to the market? So are you competitive with your peers? Are you leading? Are you lagging? Are you at that 50th percentile? And then how do we give you a plan that meets your needs? It addresses any inequities that we find, and it addresses also that competitiveness in the marketplace. So you're able to draw in those quality candidates. Everybody's kind of competing for that smaller group of people anymore, it seems like right now. And then also it's a plan that fiscally, is it going to be sustainable? Can we give you something that you're going to be able to manage and move forward with in the upcoming years? So what you see there, these are the phases of the project, and they're written in there. They look like distinct phases, but there's a lot of overlap in how we start these. So the phase 1 is our kickoff. That's our project initiation. It's the data collection. All of our projects start with data collection. So we get your employee database, and then we analyze what you have in place, how you're using it, and then we identify how people are moving through those plans. Do a lot of project team meetings. We have department interviews where we were able to meet with, like I said, those department heads and understand what their needs are at that department level, not just at the city level. It's advancing on without me there. And then we look at that market positioning, like I mentioned before. So that's where we go through and we collect the data from those peers that we identified to see how your pay plans compare. And then obviously the implementation strategy and then develop the report. When we did the employee outreach, when we met with folks, we asked them first, why here? Why Griffin? What brought you to work here and what's kept you here? And then what we hear a lot is that quality of life. You got a really busy area just here north of you, and people like the pace of life and the work-life balance here. And that's a strong draw for folks who want to be here. Job security, especially coming off of COVID, people really value the security offered by working with public sector, working with City of Griffin. Referred by friends and family as this being a good place to work. And then supportive leadership, feeling like that your leadership here really had that open door policy where people could be heard and bring some things up and know that their input was valued. The concerns that we heard here were much like what we hear in other areas. This concern that you're falling behind of those peers around you and not being as competitive with salaries. They wanted to know that their job descriptions were going to be current and updated to reflect, what these jobs have evolved into as time has changed. And then requests for additional career path opportunities so people could grow in those career fields that they've selected. When we collected your data, all of our data starts with a snapshot in time. HR data, staffing data is not static. That changes almost daily, especially in public sector. People come, go, you get raises, you get promotions. And so at the point where we collected your data, we had 439 employees. You were using 144 classification titles. You had 35 pay grades with range spreads that varied about 50%. And it included all of your different classifications under the one plan. So the public safety part of it, the regular, I'm gonna call general classifications as well. Everybody blended into one plan. There was some inconsistencies in your structure, primarily at midpoint progression. Midpoint progression is as you go from one grade to the next to the next. That's how much space is in between each pay grade. 86% of your employees were below midpoint. Okay, so at the midpoint of each pay grade, 86% of your employees were below. So that tells us a couple of things. One, I'm looking at tenure, the length of time. And then the other part is I'm looking at how people are progressing through those pay ranges. And having that many below a midpoint tells me they aren't moving as readily through a pay range as you would expect in certain areas. Salary was not consistent with tenure. Again, same thing. You're not seeing them progress horizontally through a pay grade. Did find that there was minimal compression between supervisors and their direct reports. So you've got that room in between those two levels like you would like to see in a plan. Your market survey, we did 16 peers, 11 participated. Private sector data was something that we also pulled just to do a compare. I don't use private sector data when I'm building your salary model later on, but I do use it as a check against where we're setting you. So we know if you've got certain areas where you're seeing turnover, people going to the private sector, how is that comparing? Is there adjustments that we need to make? We used 101 classifications to collect salary data for, and with that, we got a little over 400, right? 440 data points. Those are good data points that we could use to do the regression analysis like we do later on. Based on what we found that you're pretty much at market at the point in time where we collected this data. But now keep in mind, the data was collected earlier in the spring. And if we were to collect that data again now, because I know we have other projects in this area, and I know other folks that were also adjusting their plans at the same time, with no changes, if I collected the data now, you would be behind market. Just knowing where people have shifted and adjusted to since that point in time, okay? So taking into account your current structure, your needs, the hierarchy of your classification, and then looking at that market data, we put together some recommendations that would bring you back to that market average, to bring you back to that 50th percentile, all right? The structure, we're going to provide a little bit of different structure moving forward so we get some more consistency in the structure. And we're going to put forward a different pay plan for your staff. All right, well, I'm going to change the way that one pay plan looks on you. Now, whenever you go forward and implement a new pay plan, there's always options on how you do that. We did several different options when we calculated out how to implement a new pay plan. We looked at just spring to new minimums. We looked at higher year parities. We looked at current range penetration, which is what we're going to talk about, and then what we landed on. So really to meet the needs of your staff and adjust everybody onto a new pay plan and minimize compression as much as we could, the recommendation to implement staff onto a new pay plan is what we call current range penetration, but we're going to do this with a cap. So current range penetration says if you look at where an employee currently exists in their pay grade, and if they are 30% into their pay grade, you crosswalk them over to a new plan and you place them 30% into the new pay grade. So everybody's holding their relative positions. We're not compressing them down like just a bring to new minimum would. And then the cap on it helps you with a budget control, and it also helps with the fact that we're giving you a whole new plan that looks different than your last one. So your implementation option here with current range penetration capped, it's going to impact 377 employees. And it's going to cost $1.3 million. That's going to get you those adjustments that you need to address the vacancy rates that you have, help draw people in, and quality staff. So as you're competing with all your peers around you, to draw them here to Griffin. And that adjustment would be almost 8%. That's an average. That's not. Some people would be getting very little adjustment. Others would be getting a larger adjustment. The folks that would be getting a smaller adjustment, the model would tell you that they're already making what the market would anticipate that their salary should be. So they would receive little to no adjustment. Other folks would have, up to 8 to 12% adjustments based on where they fall in their current plans. So your new pay plan, open range design, you got 23 pay grades, range spread 65%, grade progression averages at 5.7%. And I do allow for 3 part-time classifications there, so you can kind of keep the part-time separate from all of your full-time permanent employees. All right? So your fire plan, we're gonna break fire out onto their own schedule. They would have 7 pay grades, still an open range design, range spread again 65%. Your grade progression here is gonna vary from 5 to 15%. That primary reason is for that increasing level of classification, the complexity and that rank structure that you find with public safety. So for your police, this is for your sworn staff. These 6 pay grades, range spread 65%. And again, your progression is gonna vary a little bit to account for that rank structure in public safety. Your linemen, we're gonna break those out as well. That way you can handle those classifications separately from the rest of them. 6 pay grades, range spread 65%, grade progression on average about 6.5. And then moving forward, you would want to adopt the pay plans, hopefully, and that'll help address your needs, get you to a competitive place from a salary perspective. Classification wise, there's room in that plan for you to grow, especially in that general plan. We give plenty of room in there to create additional career paths as you need them. So for example, you could admin administrative assistant 1, 2, 3. So people could grow in those classifications. There's room in there to do that. You won't have to create new grades for them later on. Crosswalk folks over into the new plan, looking at that current range with the cap adjustment on there. And then moving forward, conduct some small scale surveys so that your plan stays current. So spot check those, a few classifications every year against those peers to make sure the plan, you're not slipping compared to the market. And then if you're doing that on an annual basis, then you really shouldn't need another comprehensive plan review like this one for another 5 years or so. Like all public sector documents, review, revise, update, keep them current, keep them relevant. You know, all of our public sector documents have to do that to keep them current. So they're all what I always call living documents. Remaining task, adoption of the plan. You do have a final report there. It's already been completed as well. And then we are also here for the next year to help with any technical support, advice, anything that the city needs, kind of as we kind of work through this next year. And that's it. If there's any questions, happy to address.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm looking on the document where it has the exhibits 4B, that was about 6 slides back.
Mhm.
You've got 3 columns, proposed, proposed, and proposed. So the first column, is that the minimum? Proposed minimum, is that correct?
Yeah, that should say
You got
proposed
the-
minimum, midpoint, and max. That, yeah,
Okay, so
that
it's-
row got shrunk. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
so proposed midpoint.
Yes, the minimum,
And so
midpoint,
how do
and
we
then
know where
max.
So how do we know where we're at in terms of a position on that?
At the individual level,
I mean, so you got first column is proposed minimum. How do we compare where we're currently at to know how far we just?
You go back to slide 6. So slide 6 is the assessment of current conditions. We currently have fire and PD pulled out by the F and the P next to them, and it's a little hard to see on here, but if we go, there you go. So that side right there, you'll see sort of 13F is your first fire, which is 35,283. And if you flip back to the proposed fire pay plan, the new minimum goes to 37,278.
Gotcha.
Is that
Thank you.
okay?
Are there any questions from the board at this time? Does staff have any other comments, Stephanie?
I did just want to make that note. So although it looks as though we're pulling out fire and PD, we've always sort of done that with the Ps and Fs next to them. Lyman, if you'll remember, we did that January of 2020, I think it was. Is that right? So they sort of were pulled out as well. We just didn't really look at it on a separate pay plan. This time we have, because otherwise it skews sort of what the spreads become by grade. So that's why we went ahead and pulled it out. So it just sort of showed that the other classifications remained within that 5-7% range.
Ms. Stephanie, anything?
No, sir, nothing else.
Thank you so much for your hard work, and we look forward to reviewing this and hopefully making a staff recommendation to move forward in the near future.
That sounds great. And if you guys have any questions while you're reviewing, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item is consider executive session pursuant to CGA section 501421 for the purpose of consulting and meeting with legal counsel pertaining to pending potential litigation, settlement claims, administrative proceedings, or other judicial actions brought or to be brought by or against the agency or any officers or employee or which the agency or any officer or employee may be directly involved. Do we have a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Mr. Tensley, second by Ms. Murray.
So you got all you need from me, right?
Yes.
We have a motion to come out of
Yes,
session.
we already did that.
No, I need to do it out here.
Oh, okay. I make a motion.
Tinsley.
Tinsley made a motion.
Good job, everybody.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Mr. Tinsley, to adjourn the meeting, second by Mr. McCoy.
Good job, thank you.
Yes, man. Yeah, you take it.
We're the persons, baby. Don't.
All in favor?
Go.
No.